So I got good news and I got some bad news. The good news is that this week's Grandmaster Nightfall is dropping double loot. The bad news? Well, Plug 1, for some reason, is back in the loot rotation, which is kind of odd considering that this week was supposed to be Izumi. Bungie has not said whether or not this is a bug or intentional or whatever. I will update a comment down below once Bungie finally does answer us, because we did tweet it out earlier asking if Plug 1 was supposed to be the intentional drop for this week's Grandmaster Nightfall. With that being said, we're still going to give a guide on how to farm this Grandmaster Nightfall, as the Saber Strike is actually one of the better Nightfalls to grind. You can easily complete this Nightfall under 15 minutes, and with the right builds and artifact mods, you can easily drop that down sub 12 minutes. And for double loot, that's pretty nice. Now, the champions that you have to deal with this week are Overload champions and Barrier champions. The only shields that you have to deal with are Arc shields and Void shields. Champions mob is also a modifier like always, as well as Saber Protocol, where there is increased incoming solar damage as well as environmental damage. Don't be overly concerned about that. I would actually suggest rocking a sniper resist mod and an arc resist mod, as there's a lot of things in this Nightfall that does arc damage, and I would say 9 times out of 10, that's what's gonna get you. Now, build wise, as always, fellas, we've been rocking primarily the same thing week in and week out. You know I love our Eye of the Netherworld build. In combination with Wither Horde has been our baby. Bombad was essentially rocking my loadout as well. Les, though, was rocking Chaos Reach, and I would say pretty much any ad clearing subclass for that third subclass is just fine. You don't need all 3 players on the fire team rocking Warlock and rocking Shadebinder at that. You can kind of play with whatever. Although I will say our Stasis build is still one of the best builds when it comes to locking down Grandmasters, especially this one. But a couple things I do want to bring up that was extremely beneficial with this build, as always, is of course Blink Watcher and Ice Flare Bolts. A great combination there, alongside Whisper of Torment, Whisper of Durance, as well as Whisper of Bonds. Now, Whisper of Chains has hands down become one of the best mods for me in terms of keeping me alive, especially in this Nightfall where you are in close quarters with your enemies. Now, something we mentioned last week, but we didn't have Overload champions last week, so I couldn't really show you, was actually the combination of these Stasis turrets and Sundering Blast. You see, Sundering Blast states that stunning a champion creates an explosive blast. Now, that damage is pretty significant. It's actually really nice just to knock off a chunk of health off of champions. But what's so beautiful about combining Sundering Blast with Bleak Watcher and these Stasis turrets is actually the mechanics of Overload champions. You see, every time you freeze an Overload champion, it pulls them out of their stun phase, which is normally not a good thing, but it works out here for whoever it is on your team that's rocking Sundering Blast, because as they're getting shots in with their primary, they can just continually keep restunning the champion over and over. Now, there is a small cooldown, and about every other stun would result in a Sundering Blast explosion, which is significant, especially considering we're locking these Overload champions in place together. We're simultaneously dropping Wither Horde shots and Anarchy shots with Breach and Clear, and every time Sundering Blast procs, it doesn't just do single target damage, but an AoE explosion damage, which is chaining with everything else that's happening here. I gotta say, guys, this one adjustment actually trimmed off nearly 1.5 minutes on our Nightfall runs. Now, the weapons of choice, I was still rocking with the Horde. I even got a rocket launcher right here that I am in love with inside of PvE. This is my Vorpal Hezen's Vengeance. I can't wait to get the Adept version or the Time Lost version. Les was rocking Anarchy. Bombad was rocking Anarchy. And no, guys, Anarchy has not been nerfed. I've had so many people join today while we were testing weapons, saying things like, rest in peace, Anarchy. No, Anarchy is still good, and it will continue to be good for the rest of this season. Anarchy will be nerfed next season, so you're still good, guys. Take advantage of it still. Now, the other things that really go well with my build is, of course, Firepower. I like to rock 2 of them as a double stack alongside stacks on stack, and of course taking charge. All of this in combination allows me to have my grenade up pretty much at all times, thus allowing me to get a stasis turret off whenever I need to. Now, getting to this Nightfall is very similar to how we've always done it before, except I would say that the crowd control with stasis turrets alongside Wither Horde is the best I've ever experienced, especially when we get down to that first room area where you've got all these ads going in. Like I've said in previous Nightfall guides, do not sit on your supers, fellas. As soon as you get a super, discharge it, use it to clear the bulk of the ads and then focus on the champions together. I see a lot of people that like to just sit on their super and then try to use their supers to take down champions. You really want to clear out all the ads first and then focus on the champions together with your weapons, because that's really when you got to take advantage of stunning or popping barriers on barrier champions. And it's difficult to do that while you are in your super. But this room overall, you just want to discharge stasis turrets, drop these Wither Horde shots in. Guys, this is by far the best I've been able to deal with this room, and it's normally a very hectic room. We've done Ursa Furiosa and Well of Radiance in the past. Don't get me wrong, I still like those subclasses, but they're definitely not nearly as optimal as what you're seeing here in front of you. Now, this is the room right here that can really mess you up, but it's also simultaneously one of the most satisfying rooms if you get right. We actually like to open up with a super in this room, whether it's a Chaos Reach or something else, but something to just kind of clear the room of all the trash ads. Simultaneously, whoever's rocking stasis, whether it's Revenant Super or Shadebiner or whatever, drop those stasis abilities right up against that doorway. You want to try to trap everything right there. And again, this is where it really starts to become sweet. You start locking everything in place, whether it's with a stasis turret or maybe even your stasis super. Drop Wither Horde shots off on your enemies, proc breach and clear, and whoever it is that's stunning these overload champions, make sure that they have Sundering Blast with them, as all of that damage will be chaining to everything around it, clearing out these trash ads, hitting all these other champions as they're spawning. This room can be beautifully optimized if done correctly. At the same time, it can be a nightmare room if you let these champions and these ads get out of that little small spot. So again, clear the room out first as quickly as possible with your super, and whoever it is that's rocking crowd control, get right there in the doorway and proceed to start trying to lock enemies down. And in the past, one of our favorite loadouts for this Nightfall was 2 Chaos Reaches and a Revenant Hunter, which was actually fantastic here. And you can continue to do the exact same thing. As the artifact mod, Glacial Inheritance is still a mod you can be using. I just don't rock it because, of course, it takes up your class item mod, and currently right now, Breach and Clear pretty much has been a permanent one for me when I play Warlock. Now, this room right here is the room right before the boss. You've got a barrier champion here that's up on that second level, as well as a number of overload champions there at the bottom left. I would always suggest having one person deal with the ads on the bottom there, while the other two really focus on the barrier champion. And eventually that third person who's just dealing with the trash ads needs to move up and help with the barrier champion as well. You want to kind of get the high ground on those overload champions. But as soon as you deal with the barrier champions and those trash ads, look down and focus up on the overload champions. Really similar to the previous room, if you do this correctly, especially if you drop a stasis turret down there, it's just going to continually lock them in place. Which again, for combinations like Anarchy or Wither Horde, anything that's doing AoE damage, Sundering Blast, all of those things will just chain damage back and forth between all these champions, thus allowing you to deal with them very quickly. Now, the boss room is actually probably the easiest room if you sit right up against these stairs. Literally, you want to hug these stairs and occasionally just throw a crouch in to throw the boss off. The boss can still snipe you here. However, you can drop a rift right there. And if you drop a stasis turret, it'll sit there and keep messing with the boss, which should keep the boss from hitting you, or at least not as accurately. Now, the boss has pretty much 3 health phases. The first phase is just a quarter of his health. The second phase is the second quarter of his health. And the final phase is the last half of his health. Normally in the past, we would just unload in that final phase with everything we got. And I do recommend saving your super for that last phase. But for the most part, in comparison to other Grandmaster Nightfall, I found that Saber here is squishier than other bosses, so you don't have to save literally everything for that final phase. Although try to save something, whether it is 1 or 2 supers or just some of your heavy ammo. But if done correctly, guys, this is one of the best Nightfalls to farm. I'm talking sub 12-minute runs, back-to-back, double loot, and currently right now, plug ones. And there were a lot of people complaining that plug was too much difficulty to obtain because, of course, Glassway was what was dropping adept plugs. Personally, as someone who spent all week playing Glassway and did lock in rolls for adept plugs, I'm kind of let down. I would have preferred the sniper this week. And this is the first time Bungie has messed up the Nightfall rotation in terms of our loot. So I don't think this is intentional, which is why I wouldn't be surprised if Bungie, after the day, reverted the loot rotation back to Izumi, started dropping double Nightfall rewards for the sniper rifle, which means for those of you that did not get plugged, now might be the best opportunity for you to go after it. Either way it goes, guys, great Nightfall, wonderful for these builds, fantastic if you got good ad control builds such as these. Anarchy is not nerfed. You can still use it for the rest of the season, so give it a go. And for those wondering about 120 round per minute hand cannons, shotguns, DMT, all that stuff, a sandbox breakdown video of that will be out this evening. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.